Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and here I'm forced to ask, will May survive this leadership election in the Conservative Party, and indeed will Brexit survive? This was going to be about Brexit, but then there were developments about lunchtime today. Well, a couple of days ago, Theresa May was forced to call off her vote on the withdrawal agreement that was scheduled to take place today because it looked like she was going to lose badly. In fact, I think she would have been better off holding her nerve and going ahead with it. And perhaps her bottling this Brexit vote in the House of Commons is one of the reasons that it tipped it over the edge. That might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. She'd been hemorrhaging leadership credibility for several months now, but this was obviously just too much. And it may seem uncharacteristic as she'd handled things so adroitly when she was Home Secretary for years. Who gets through that relatively unscathed? I remember Michael Howard, the Tory Home Secretary under John Major, he said, you know, a disaster can come out of a clear blue sky. But now Theresa May appears to be a malapert. Well, it's almost like she's got the anti-Midas touch. I mean, the economy is growing just very slowly. Crime is up sharply. The Brexit negotiations did not exactly end in triumph. The NHS is having difficulty. Things are going wrong on a number of fronts. Not catastrophically, but the totality of that looks ugly for her government's prospects in the next election. So she was cruising for a bruising if she went ahead with this vote in the House of Commons. If she lost by something like 20, then she could maybe talk those people around and hold it again in a fortnight and win. But she was going to lose by 70 or more, and some people thought that would deal a mortal blow to her premiership. I don't think so. I think she could have struggled on. Anyway, so she was, up until now, she was hoping perhaps some last-minute concessions from Brussels or assurances from her, or arm twisting by the whips. That would have worked it. The whips are these members of Parliament in charge of party discipline, as in trying to get people to vote the leadership the way the leadership wants them to vote. So that's that. So she may have calculated on this risk theory that people, even those who found this deal deeply unpalatable, would not be willing to go over the cliff, as they saw it, to either leaving the EU without an agreement or indeed remaining. Now, there are obviously some hardliners on either side of the Brexit debate, the ultra-Brexiteers who think that leaving that agreement is not only necessary, it's actually desirable, or indeed there's some Remainers who will not accept the verdict of the people. So she could have gone for brinksmanship, go for broke, as some would see it. She didn't just have one shot at this. She could submit this bill again and again, to try and get the whole deal ratified. But I think if she didn't succeed after 2 goes, that'd probably be curtains for her. She's always been a pragmatist. She's non-ideological, one nation Tory. Remember, she campaigned for Remain with her characteristic lack of panache. And she nevertheless is implementing Brexit, as she said in an interview a year ago, when she was repeatedly asked, do you think that leaving the EU is good for the United Kingdom? And she wouldn't give a straight answer. She simply said, I will carry out the will of the people. So she rightly views the electorate as her masters, as her masters, not as servants. And so she is doing their bidding. So it might have seemed to be a poisoned chalice inheriting the premiership, but she chose to inherit it. She could have just stayed in the cabinet, but no, opportunity knocks. She might never get a chance to be Prime Minister again. She went for it. Now, admittedly, she fouled her own nest by calling that early election. It seemed to be an inspired choice because the tea leaves suggested that the party was going to win by a landslide, but she really fumbled the hand dealt her, and in a decidedly lacklustre and leaden-footed campaign, managed to turn a lead of something like 25% into a lead of 2%, a staggering disaster for her, really. Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Anyway, so there are some Brexit converts, people like her, who voted Remain but now accept Brexit. But some of these converts have reconverted with the withdrawal agreement, said, okay, I campaigned for Remain, we lost, we must have Brexit. But the withdrawal agreement is so unacceptable, some of these people say, we've got to go back to the drawing board, think again, another referendum, very least another election, or the EU's got to make more concessions or something, but this deal will not stand. Now, that might have been an excuse for some of them who were desperately looking for a reason to say, well, people voted to leave the EU, but we could disregard that anyway. Astonishingly, Farage has argued for them. I mean, Nigel Farage is someone for whom I used to have a lot of time, but I've lost great deal of respect for him in the past few years. And now he's saying that remaining in the EU would be better than this agreement, although he preferred to leave without an agreement. So the European Court of Justice has just thrown a lifeline to the extremist Remainers, saying the United Kingdom can unilaterally cancel Brexit. The UK sent a letter 29th of March 2017 to the European Union expressing its desire to withdraw from the EU. That set the clock going 2 years from that date, 29th of March 2019. The UK is out of the EU, with or without an agreement. But the European Court of Justice has said if the United Kingdom says, changed our mind, then the UK can stay in on the present terms, right? Because up until that time, it was possible that the remaining 27 member states would say, you change your mind, you want to be allowed back in? Let's think about that. Well, you've got to pay us more money, and you have to join the euro, and you have to promise never to leave again, and set various conditions. And that would have obviously strengthened the hand of the Brexiteers, saying, we can't remain on the current terms. We can only remain on terms which are less favourable than the ones we had before. So anyway, this is a real boon to the Remain side, who are obviously painting a most harrowing picture of life outside the EU, either with or without this agreement. And so they can say, always keep a hold of nurse for fear of meeting something worse. Stay with the EU. Better the devil you know. There was steady economic growth, there's security, there's strength in numbers, all the rest of it, the commerce is easy. Anyway, we're on the countdown to Independence Day, 29th of March, and the Uber civil servants have been leaking news about the paucity of food and medicines that would occur if we leave without an agreement. Preeti Patel has said, well, if there's no agreement, that's really going to impact the Republic of Ireland's economy, is set to shrink by 7% if that happens. So we've got to point that out to the EU, that if they're going to play hardball, so can we. It would hurt an EU member state. And by the way, if the EU really cared about us in the Republic of Ireland, they'd do everything to keep the UK happy, to make it an attractive deal to the United Kingdom, so we in the Irish Republic are not hurt by this. Now, Preeti Patel has been savaged for saying there will be trade difficulties for the Irish Republic if there's no agreement. She's telling the plain truth. Does anyone think she's wrong? I mean, these are the fears that other people like Leo Varadkar have raised, the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland. And now she's being monstered, saying, oh, you're grossly insensitive, how offensive, you're threatening to starve people, what about the Irish famine? This is just hideously insulting, which is nonsense. She never said a word about food. Depriving people of food, the most famous thing she never said. So for several years, Remainers have been saying, oh, we can't have that because we'll run out of fresh food in a year and a half. So in a day and a half and things like that. If we leave the EU, if the UK leaves the EU. As soon as Preeti Patel points out it's a two-way street, she is execrated for it. Anyway, no one is going to starve in any member state as a result of Brexit, I guarantee you. Trade might become trickier, food prices might go up a bit. I think they might go down, certainly in the UK, being out of the common agricultural policy, things like that. The EU, which deliberately inflates prices, which deliberately makes the poorest subsidise the wealthiest, giving money to massive landowners like the Prince of Wales. But that's by the by. So the Republic of Ireland, we need to decide. If we want to stay in the want to stay in the EU, there is a price to pay. You could argue it's absolutely worth it. Fine. But be willing to pay that price. If we leave the EU, that would be a different matter. We could leave the EU and ask to rejoin the United Kingdom. That would be different. But very, very few people want to do that. But 90% of public opinion in the Irish Republic is Europhile. So anyway, there's been lots of scaremongering by the Remainers. As typical, people say it's gone from project fear to project hysteria. Now, Freddie Forsyth, he's a stalwart Brexiteer before the term was even invented, saying just leave the European Union and go to world trade rules. We don't need the European Union's trade agreements. Now, I would like to believe him, but I suspect he is being overly optimistic. Though I am a passionate Brexiteer, I don't have rose-tinctured spectacles about it. I don't think, the UK will economically gain for it in the short term. I think after several years it will. I could be mistaken. And I've seen the so-called experts like Mark Carney and others really getting it disastrously wrong. Remember the emergency budget George Osborne was going to say? The millions of jobs that were going to be lost. Millions, even by the vote, not just by actually leaving the EU. And so much was going to be wiped off the stock market and so many businesses were going to pull out, things like that. But anyway, Theresa May, will she survive this vote? I think she will. I'll come to more of that later. So after that, she's not going to get this bill through the House of Commons. Varadkar particularly said, Brussels and Strasbourg, we mustn't make any more concessions to the United Kingdom. That is our final offer. Take it or leave it. But that is perhaps a bit too hard line from him. That's perhaps rash, because if there is no deal, that's going to impact on the Republic of Ireland much more so than any other member state. It's not going to hurt Croatia very much. So there may well be an election or a referendum again. So the wind is in the sails of Remain. Doesn't guarantee they'll make it, but I think they will. I think there's a 60% chance the UK is going to stay in the European Union, but I got it wrong before. In 2016, I said there's a 60% chance that Remain would win, though I didn't want that result. So at the 11th hour, the United Kingdom could have this deathbed conversion. Actually, please, we want to stay in the European Union. No need to change the terms of membership, as I've pointed out. I think the UK, if she does decide to stay within the comity of the EU countries, the European Union will then amend the Treaty of Lisbon to say no more right to secede. You put us through a nightmare for 2.5 years. Nobody's ever done that to us again. It's not a confederation. This is a federation. You are not allowed to leave. Even if every single person, member state, wants to break away, nah, not happening. So remember the referendum. And Cameron said, this is not just an election. It's not just for a few years. This is forever. But of course, that has been reneged upon by the Europhile elite. This issue has riven the party, well, for almost 30 years. Remember the late 1980s, the whole European exchange rate mechanism thing was mooted, and this is when Thatcher started to be a Eurosceptic, and most of her cabinet was Europhile. The idea of forming the European Union came around. There was a European Economic Community up until that time. The idea was that it should metamorphose into the European Union, and Thatcher was saying, oh, I don't like this. So this issue has divided the Conservative and Unionist Party for about 30 years, and the Cameron thought he could finally put it to bed. There was a small, very noisy faction of Tory backwoodsmen who were protesting about this from the late 1980s, more vociferous at the Treaty of Maastricht, signed in 1992. And Thatcher was very shrill against the exchange rate mechanism, as I pointed out. Then the Treaty of Maastricht, she was no longer Prime Minister by that time, doing a lot of backseat driving, being deeply unhelpful to John Major, her successor as Conservative Prime Minister. So Cameron called this referendum. I was staggered that he honoured an election pledge, because he'd broken a very similar pledge to put the Treaty of Lisbon to the people in a referendum. Cameron thought he'd win, even if just by one vote. He would win, and that's it. He would put the issue to bed. He would be the toast of Brussels and Strasbourg. The UK's place in the EU would be assured for all time. The trouble is, Cameron had played to the Eurosceptic gallery for a while. There'd been nods in their direction to placate that sort of opinion. I heard him make a speech like this at Oundle way back in 2003, saying how woeful the common agricultural policy was, how it dumped on developing markets and impoverished African countries. He had to appease withdrawals a little bit. He thought he would shoot UKIP's fox, which might come in the way in between him and Downing Street in the next election. He thought it would kill separatism stone dead. It would unite the party. It was so clever until it wasn't. But there we are. But anyway, so over 48 MPs, Conservative MPs, signed this letter to Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 committee, leadership election. Now, yesterday, only 26 of them had gone public with having signed. We didn't know the exact number, but we knew 26 names who declared themselves. Fascinatingly, Boris Johnson wasn't among them. I mean, he was one of those who signed, as we now know, but he wasn't brave enough to put his head above the parapet. But, you know, opportunity knocks. His sister Rachel vouchsafed that since he was a toddler, he fancied himself as world king. And this is his second shot, maybe his last shot as being Prime Minister. I don't think he'll make it. Who'll vote to get rid of May? Well, these 48 you want her out, they clearly will, but not many other people will. They're the soft Brexiteers, those who said we're going to vote yes, this Brexit agreement, this withdrawal agreement is May's baby, and they're going to go for it, right? Of roughly 315 Conservative MPs, she's going to have over 220 on her side. That's more than half the party. Even these ultra-Remainers who want to stay in the EU now, will they vote against it? I don't think so, because they're worrying that'll weaken their hand even more and bring to office a more hardline Eurosceptic person, a leaver, someone who really believes in it. The prospect of Boris Johnson would obviously fill them with horror. So I think they will vote for May because she is their last hope. Strong and stable. Remember that was her electoral slogan? It seems like a sick joke now. Well, she's been humiliated again, and she's carried on. She's quite mettlesome. You know, some other people would have thrown in the towel, but perhaps she's made of sterner stuff. As I said, her days are numbered. I think she won't long survive 29th of March. She'll survive this vote. She will still be in Downing Street in time for mince pies, but not much longer. There's obviously a slim possibility she'll leave, the withdrawal agreement will be a success, the economy will improve, immigration will be down, public services will improve, the stock market will go up, the pound will go up, blah, blah, blah. And by the time of the next election, things will be looking rosy, and that she could even win another term. I think it highly improbable, though. Well, it's certainly not dull, but we shall know anon.